This enablement training is part 2 of 2 for Hybrid Workspaces Studio Packager Troubleshooting, running through workshop examples. This course will cover troubleshooting hybrid workspaces using workshop examples. Feel free to download any course PDFs to follow along or reference. Be sure to watch part 1 of this series for additional troubleshooting details about the debugger. The presenter is a Turbo developer engineer, Oleg Somfein. This presentation is presented to a live audience, so there will be discussion and questions throughout the presentation. Let's begin.
All right, so as some of you know, when you interact with customers, when they report an issue, there's not a lot of information that's being passed on. It's really up to you to ask the right questions and get the right resources in order to be successful in troubleshooting the application. Let's see. So the first application we're going to look at is called PsychPro. It's been said that the end user was not able to package the application successfully when they tried to package the application and run it. It gives them an error preventing them from starting the application. So we requested detailed description of the issue, logs, and application installers. In this case, they just sent us information on how to install the application, as well as the installers themselves. But basically, they provide us with the installer. We went through the install steps and captured the application. After capturing the application, we've now gone back to our clean system and we'll try to run the application. So we'll copy over our capture, our image to our clean system. And we'll go ahead and import it and try to run it. Oh, I missed something. All right. So when we run our package, we get this error that says it having an error loading a DLL. So this is helpful in a way because right off the bat, we have an application error that's telling us, oh, there's a problem loading a DLL file. We can focus at looking at DLL load failures first. Okay, so remembering our slides here, does anyone have any idea what the next step would be?
Probably export the logs. That was the turbo log, was it?
Mm-hmm. All right, so good. Our next step is to actually gather logs from the failure. And in this case, we will start a new container to keep a clean sandbox so that previous sandbox contents don't cause the logs to be generated differently, so they can be compared easier. We'll put in our diagnostic flag. And we'll execute. Since the error occurs on application startup, you don't have to take before and after logs because it's immediate. All right. In this case, I'm not really interested in what happens after acknowledging the error. So I will go ahead and start a new window and export my logs. Oh, I missed the container name. All right. So my logs were exported here. Go ahead and copy these logs. All right, so I have my failure logs. What should we do next?
Opening the debugger, I would assume.
Okay. Let's open them in the debugger.
Or the diagnostics app.
Let's see, Studio, I think 1606 just came out. All right. All right, so we have them opened in debugger. Are we just going to look at the main file? Do that. Take a look at this. Oof. There is a lot going on here. Now, we cut off the logs right after the error showed up. So one thing we can do is just go straight down and look at the ending, right? Because the error should be near the end. Another thing we can do, I guess, is filter by DLLs. Again, we'll focus towards the end here and we'll look for some failures. These are all okay here. This is entrance. So it'll be for the load and unload. We'll go up. And here we start to see something interesting. It looks like it's trying to load this DAO DLL, but it's unable to. Right? Does everyone see that?
I don't get how you noticed that so quickly because it's got level log.
Yes, log typically indicates a failure. So if you look at these other ones for NT-open file or NT-create file, all these levels are okay. And the status is 0. 0 indicates success.
I thought they were level ERR.
Those are for actual errors. These are just the VM tries to execute the NT-create function on this file, and it fails with this status. But I mean, there's a lot of cases where, you know, checking for a file or trying to open a file will result in a non-zero status, but it could be an expected behavior. So it's not a true error. It's just checking if a file is there, right?
Okay.
If we look at the bottom here, so see your function is anti-create file. The status is a non-zero value. It's trying to read the attributes and synchronize and do a generic read. And you can find out more about these by looking up the Microsoft documentation. What's important for us in this case, also the disposition is file open. So it is trying to open it and not actually create the file. So what's important when we look at this line, for us at least, is to check what the status means. So we will go ahead and open our resources here and look up the anti-status values. It says status object path not found. Right? So the error means that they wasn't able to find a file, but when you're loading DLLs, it could also apply to dependencies. The first thing we would want to do is actually check if the file does exist, since it says it doesn't exist. Let's see.
Could I get a favor quick, Oleg?
Mm-hmm.
Up on line 361 is an NT open. I don't see a
361 here.
Yeah, I don't see a disposition there. So is there some relationship to disposition and just the NT create function?
Yes. Indeed, there is. So this is an NT create function, and this is an NT open file function.
But the line we're troubleshooting effectively is trying to open a file.
Yes, via the
So that's
NT create
confusing.
file function. Yes, and that's just how Microsoft has designed their system.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, all in all, you'll start to see some patterns because there's well-established patterns for writing software applications. Also, a lot of people don't, write everything from scratch. They use some sort of toolkit or a runtime like .NET and C++. So you start to see some patterns in how things are being done, but you can open a file with NT open file and you can open a file with NT create file. I believe NT create file gives you the option to create a file if it doesn't exist based on the disposition that you specify. But yeah, it's interesting how you can do the same thing using multiple different ways, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right. As I was saying, we'll go ahead and open our image. Let's see, it was in capture. And we are looking in C program files. x86.
Oh, regular.
AO360. There is nothing in program files x86 Psych Pro. It's DAO360. The first one is actually C program files, common files. So let's check that out. Oh, the file does not exist there. It's in C program files x86 common Microsoft shared DAO.
There's a 350 file instead of the 360. Interesting.
Yeah, that's curious, right? Okay.
At this point, would you start thinking of Googling Microsoft shared DAO installs? I mean, is this a Microsoft thing or is it PsychPro's thing?
I believe DAO is a Microsoft component. So the next step I'll do, actually go on my capture machine and check the behavior there. Let's see. So here's my capture machine as PsychPro installed and captured. Here it is. Okay, so we know it's not able to load that DLL DLL. Let's change the resolution on this one to make it easier to see.
So now the first thing you're going to do is check to see if the file exists on the hosts.
Yes. That is exactly what I am going to do. And that will answer the question of whether the file was there before we captured the application or not. Not PsychPro. It is in the common files, Microsoft shared DAO. Oh, it is in here.
But that probably existed before you even captured it.
Yes. So maybe this is a file that is a part of the Windows operating system, since I'm looking at the file here and it says it was last modified in 2019, right? So that's curious. Now, since I've verified that it does exist here, I would usually go back to my clean system and check if it exists there as well, right? Because if it exists on both systems and it doesn't work on one of them, then there's something else going on because the file does exist. It doesn't have, it's not part of the image, but it is on the system.
Could be,
first, yeah.
Could be corrupt or a dependency.
Could be. In that case, I would check the SHA checksum to make sure that the two files match up.
Right.
But let's go ahead and actually import the image here and try to run it to see what happens. Go ahead and do turbo import svm psychpro see users, my username. Okay. And then we'll execute PsychPro. Okay. So we get the same behavior here. Another failure. And this is typically less than expected because if we were missing a component or a component didn't get captured, then we typically expect this to work on the capture machine because that's where we installed it. And the component will be present, whether on the native file system or the package. Okay. So the image does not work on the system where the application is installed. What do you guys think we should do next? Anyone?
Import that file into it.
Sorry, what was that?
Import the 360 file into the image.
Sure. Why don't we try that? I will save this as a different configuration. So where should we add this? In program files x86?
Right, Microsoft shared
Right here.
DAO. In the same path that it's looking for, right? In the log.
Yep. Hang on. Looks like the Turbo Studio UI froze. By the way, we just released the Turbo Studio update with a fix for the GUI freezes. I don't know if you guys have seen those. I usually only see them on VirtualBox. But if the Studio UI freezes, we have an update that should resolve those. Okay. Ever build one DAO. Go to Microsoft Share DAO, add the file. Files, Microsoft Shared, DAO 360. All right.
Actually, if I was going to, I'm not convinced this would help, but if I was going to do this, I would probably grab the entire folder because a lot of times, the entire DAO folder, since there could be multiple dependencies.
Oh, it actually is the entire folder.
Oh, okay, you did? Okay, sorry.
So, yeah.
Okay. If I see, sorry.
Usually you're right, but in this case, this folder does actually exist, or it has existed before we did the app capture, and these are all the new files here, except this one, and we can tell that by the date of when it was installed. So the only one that we were missing was the DAO 360. If we had more, then I would have added the folder like you said. Anyways, so we added DAO 360. Let's run it. See what happens. Still getting the error, even though the file has been added to the configuration. Okay, so that was not it. It's a good thing to look at. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't the issue in this case. Any other leads on what we should do next? Okay, well, for one, let's see if the application actually runs, the native one. I'm going to go ahead and launch the native application. See, it starts, no error. Click OK, see if we can proceed. And it does work. Okay, so far we have an application that works when it's installed native, but it doesn't work.
Launch the native application within a container now, or?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. We'll call the container PsychPro native. I actually need to know where the executable is, so I can specify it. Copy this. Base for the image. And write copy or merge isolation. Okay. The native application works as well when we run it in the VM. So in this case, we see that the application is actually compatible with the VM. There appears to be an issue in the configuration itself. So in the next step, we'll gather logs from this one, from the native run in the container, so that we can compare them to the logs from the failing case. And I believe we got this far in the other logs, so we'll go ahead and export these. So turbo logs, export. Like pro native. And here are our logs. I'll go ahead and close this container up. Copy this to our log folder. All right. Well, let's compare our logs and see what happens. Does anyone remember how to compare logs?
That's what great comparison option is. That will launch the external compare utility that you.
Now I like to have my failing logs on the left side and my passing logs on the right side. It's up to you how you want to have that. And there's only one process for this application, so we'll focus on that. This xproc process is just the bootstrap process. Typically, I'll look at it if there's error starting the application, like there was an error reading the sandbox directory or something like that. But in most cases, this one, you wouldn't really focus on this one if you have your process starting up. Okay, so which logs do we want to look at?
Pass.
Once you've got highlighted now, so.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I had a problem hearing it.
I said the DLLs on the ones that you've got highlighted.
Ah, okay. So we'll look at DLLs. I do actually have a license for this beyond compare. I just reset the container, which is why I see this warning. Okay. Looking at this, we see that it matches up pretty well until the very end over here. And this is our first difference. Do you guys see the problem here? Anyone able to explain what may be happening?
I'd look at that status code, the C quad 03A.
Well, we already looked at the status code. It's about the object not being found, right?
Okay, right.
So in our failing logs, we see that this DAO file cannot be found here. In our successful logs, we see that the anti-create file function succeeds and returns a status code of 0, saying that the file is successfully loaded. If we look at the actual arguments in more detail, specifically the path, we see that it's actually trying to look
at
different paths. Yeah.
32-bit and 64-bit environments.
Exactly. So this one is looking in the 64-bit folder, while this one is looking in the 32-bit folder. So this one fails, and then it actually tries to go back to the executables folder, because if it fails to look up the specified path, the DLL loader goes through a couple of different folders to try to find the DLL. Usually that's the folder where the executable is located at. It could be the current directory and some common Windows directories like System32 or sysfile64. In this case, it looks like it just tried to check the parent folder of the psychpro executable. But all in all, in the successful case, we see that it checks the right folder for this file, whereas in the failing case, it checks the wrong folder. So the next step is to actually figure out why it's checking in the wrong folder.
Does it assume within the container that's running a 32-bit on a 32-bit machine? That would be my most logical thing.
Let's see. We'll actually have to open the process log for that. And it looks like it is looking, the virtual process is 32-bit. So yes, it's behaving as if the environment is 32-bit, running on a 64-bit system. In this case, I would also look at the inventory report to see if there are any differences. So I don't see anything specifically wrong. Typically, packaged COM is not an issue, and neither is local settings. This typelib key does not specify a value, so it's typically not a problem either. Okay, there's nothing in the inventory comparison report. Well, we know the DAO file is the issue. We'll take a look at the full logs, and we'll specifically look in the area where the DAO file is loaded. So over here, I will look for DAO360.dll. These are all the same. So, no. Yep, these are all the same. So I'll skip over them. Okay, so here's our first difference on this DAO file. We see that it's on a function called anti-query key. Down here, we see that we hit the issue with loading the DLL file right after querying this key. And if we look at the actual function itself, we see that it's a string and the value here is specified as the wrong folder. Whereas in the successful run, it uses a variable, right? And it's specifically for this typelib. So let's go back to our system. We'll open our registry editor. And we'll take a look at that key. Oh. Let me pull up the key here. So it's under local machines, software, classes, typelib. And it's 00025E01. 00025E01. And it's version 5, 4. Okay, so this is the native value for this typelib. Now, if we go in Turbo Studio and try to find the same key, we'll be able to check its value as well. So we're looking for typelib 0025E01. First one, version 5, 0. Okay. All right. So this variable was converted to a turbo alias. I think somebody mentioned like the bitness of the application. And the issue here is that the turbo aliases always mean the same thing. So program files common will always reference a 64-bit folder, whereas Windows will change the meaning of their variable depending on where the file is, whether it's in the 32 or 64-bit Hive. Adding to that, it's also important that we look in the right Hive. So since it's a 32-bit process, we should really be looking in the WoW 6432 node. And actually, it's not there. I guess we'll change it in the other one. So let's go ahead and remove this turbo alias and just replace it with this variable. And in this case, I think DAO360 will be coming from the native file system. So I'll get rid of it from the config. And we'll build it. Go ahead and import our image. And it works. All right. So
the fact that Turbo is changing these parameters, is that something that you can tune, or that it's a common scenario? Because why does Turbo change these parameters into these generic ones?
I believe it just tries to normalize the paths using the turbo variables. In this case, I think there's an open issue to see if we should go back and not modify variables to turbo aliases, or whether the aliases should take the process bitness into consideration, determining the values for those aliases. That's something that our VM team would need to investigate and decide on like what will work for the most cases. In this case, the problem was with Studio making that transformation. However, it could be easily remedied by updating the registry value, right? So all you had to do is change this value so it would point to the 32-bit folder for common program files Microsoft shared, so it can find the actual DLL file.
It's something that a customer would never find.
Yes,
You can easily change it, but it's something that a customer will never find.
Exactly. Now, I would say this is a rare case, because in like 10 years, I've seen this once. And it was very recently. So it might only apply to very old legacy applications or something. But yes, as a customer, unless they have significant experience with packaging applications, they would not be able to figure it out on their own. So you would have to help them investigate this. And I mean, this is not only about Turbo Studio transformations. You can encounter issues where the registry values are different between the config and what's expected. And you can figure those out by looking at the logs as well. Yeah. As I was saying, this is not the only type of registry difference you will see while investigating. I've seen lots of cases where the config had a different registry value, or the native system had a different registry value, and the container was pulling the value from the native system because it didn't exist in the config. And this is how you would go about troubleshooting these.
One thing that strikes me as odd is that registry key even exists and we don't have the file. Because I would assume that if we wanted to define that registry key value, we probably want the DLL to be in the virtual machine. Because if we're relying on a non-virtualized copy of that DLL, then the host OS would already have that value. So most likely we could also fix it by even removing that key, because I would assume the host OS has that value, since the host OS is managing that DLL and not the VM.
Yes, let's try it out. We'll remove this whole thing and we'll just see if we can pull it from the host OS. Now, this will only work for components that come as part of the Windows operating system. I expect this to work as well, because as you said, it will pull the registry value from the native system, because this is a native component that comes stock with the operating system.
On the flip side, though, I would expect that if you can't determine that because you don't know what DLL file it is, this one's a little more obvious, but that you'd want to have it included in the package so that you can confirm that it's there so that it can run.
Yes, that's another way of doing it. That also allows you to make the DLL static. So if it changes often and your application requires a specific version of the DLL, then including it in the config will make it a static part of the container. But yeah, as you said, we've confirmed that removing the registry key also works. All right, let's move on to the next application. This is actually kind of fun, don't you guys think? It's like a big puzzle that you have to solve.
I see how the debugger tool is very effective.
Yeah, let's do this drains application. All right, so a customer reported that they built an updated package for one of their applications, and it works on some systems, but not others. So we didn't receive logs from the customer, but we did receive their image. So we only have half an hour left. So I will just go over this. As I was saying, a customer built an update for application and they found that it works on some systems, but not others. Their previous build worked on everything. And so far, they had only supplied us with the updated package build. They had also provided us with a system where it works and it doesn't work. This is the system that does not work. So we'll go ahead and generate logs on it. All right. There's our error. Go ahead and dismiss this guy and export our logs. And then we'll go to the VM where it works. And we'll go ahead and generate our logs there. This is not an error. It just says it's a demo. So we have already gotten past the other issue. So we'll export the logs at this time. Oh, there they are. And then we'll go ahead and open them in debugger. All right. What do we do next? Let's take a look at the inventory report. That's always a good first step to get a quick overview of the differences. All right. Let's start from the beginning. NSI, this is generally not a problem. Profile list, I haven't seen that be a problem. This is a stock Windows component. So is kernel 32, kernel base. RPC CRT4 is a stock Windows component. SSPICOI is one as well.
That one obviously shows up in the last line as well, but then without the path. So there's something with that one.
Yeah. Version is a stock component, but this one sticks out. Also, it's marked with a star, so we should take a closer look at it. Let's take a look at our logs. And does anyone know what the vcomp 140 is a part of? vcomp 140 is a part of, I believe, the Visual C++ redistributable, and is something that's often missed when capturing applications, especially on dirty machines. Okay, that's a good sign. We see stuff starting to diverge right around the place where it's trying to load this DLL. So we'll go down the lines, everything's the same. Then all of a sudden, tries to query this path and it starts returning errors. Whereas in the successful log, it works. So it checks the Windows System 32 path for it. Does anyone know what this anti-status code is? Not a problem. We'll check. So this is status object name not found, which occurs when the file does not exist at the specified path. So, okay, it tries to check System32 folder for the vcomp 140 DLL, doesn't find it. Checks system, doesn't find it. Checks the Windows directory, doesn't find it. Checks the program files folder, and it actually does find it. That's interesting. So the file does exist there. We'll continue going through the logs. Tries to execute anti-open on it. That works. Anti-create section. Anti-map view of section fails. Let's see. So going further down. So the anti-map section fails, then it tries to look up the file at different places again. Keeps going down. Finds it in the drains folder again. And then Looks like it finally tries to load the DLL from this folder that it finds it in, but it fails with this anti-status code. So we'll take a look at the Microsoft documentation. It says status invalid image format. This error occurs when the file is not designed to run on Windows or it contains an error. Try installing the program again using the original installation media or contact your system administrator. Interesting. So it looks like, and we'll confirm this with Studio, but there is Visual C++ redistributable component in the image, but it doesn't load either because the DLL is bad or for another reason. Let's see. In this case, we'll go ahead and take a look at the file. Where is it? It's in program files, drains, vcomp. So the file does exist there. There was some tool that lets you check the bitness of the DLL. Not sure what it was, but what it turned out to be is that this DLL was actually 32-bit. And if we look at the process, it's 64-bit. So the reason why the DLL has the invalid image error is because it's trying to load a 32-bit DLL in a 64-bit process, which fails because you can only load 64-bit DLLs in 64-bit processes and 32-bit DLLs in 32-bit processes. Otherwise, you get an architecture mismatch and the image is invalid. In this case, what ended up happening is when the customer was rebuilding their package, they used a system where the Visual C++ redistributable was already installed. So it wasn't being captured as part of the configuration. And the way to fix this issue is to either capture it on a clean system where the Visual C++ redistributable is not present, so it gets installed as part of the application install and therefore captured in the configuration, or adding Visual C++ redistributable package from turbo.net. So we can verify our hypothesis by adding our Visual C++ redistributable, which includes both 32 and 64-bit binaries. So I've reset my system to the clean state where it doesn't work. I will go ahead and import our image. Come on. Oh, oops. Doing drain 64 and include our Visual C++ for distributable for version 2015. Version 2015 is the one that matches to vcomp140.dll. You can find that out by executing a Google query on the DLL itself. So if our hypothesis is correct, we'll see the application start up when we layer this image on there. There we go. We got the demonstration dialog, and if we dismiss it, the drains application should start up. It works. All right, I had a couple more logs, but we are running towards the end of this session, so I'm gonna cut it off at this point and see if anyone has any questions or comments.
Only comment I can make is that it was quite useful to go through trying to understand the logic about it a while ago, but this is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, very helpful to see the different details about how you can pull up the status codes and things like that. You have links in there as well as the logging comparison. So that's very effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of information. The tool, I don't think, is that hard or complicated. It just, for end customers who are only interested in seeing the application work, they're not going to, dig super deep into like the diagnostics and figuring out like what does Microsoft mean when they set one disposition versus another disposition, or if the DOR is the wrong bitness. They're not going to dig that deep. That's sort of up to us to like dig in and understand why their image is not working, and then either fix their image or give them a better understanding of why their image has been built wrong, so that they can update their build processes to resolve the issue in their build process. All right. Well, if there is nothing else, I'm going to send the session here.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks a lot for today.
Appreciate your time.
Of course. Have a great day. Bye-bye.